If you've ever done any kind of project car, you know that 4 of the most dangerous words to come out of your mouth are gonna be, while I'm in there. I guess like, the car is stuck on me is probably another one, but hopefully you don't ever have to worry about that. I am double elbow deep in this black R32 project. I have the engine block right here. I have the cylinder head right over there. There's a whole stack of engine parts just over that way, nothing in the engine bay. The entire back end is pretty much the exact same way. Subframe out, diff out, all the control arms and trailing arms and wheels and everything. Obviously the wheels would be off. So I also just thought of like another really terrible thing to think or say during a project car build, and that's my parts are on back order. We have this car very much disassembled, and we're kind of in this weird waiting period where like one pebble needs to drop so that the ripple effect can be us putting everything back together. And then comes today's while I'm in there to slap me in the face. A buddy of mine found a picture of this really cool cover plate for the firewall. So I had already planned I was gonna do some second skin, sound deadening, and heat shielding just directly on the firewall. The factory firewall shield or bulkhead shield is trash. So we wanna put something else on there. It's something that, let's be honest, is probably going to function a bit better than a way old shabby piece of sound deadening and heat insulation. Luckily, because I have the original one, I can use that as a template and cut it out and put it on, not a big deal. Then Vito sends me a picture of this thing. He's like, hey Charles, have you ever seen this really cool firewall shield that completely covers a lot of that stuff and has a much cleaner look to it? Not a shaved bay look, but a very clean look. Cool, no problem. I like that. The price was like $100. Definitely a good deal. Go ahead and send me one. And then I got to thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a catch. There's something I'm missing here. And here's the thing that I'm missing. So before I can put the engine and everything back in the car, I would have to put on that firewall shield. You might be able to shoehorn it on if the car engine is stock, but we're gonna be adding turbocharger and bigger exhaust and a whole bunch of other stuff, so it's gonna be tight in this engine compartment. So it needs to go on before the engine goes on. But then I got to thinking there's gotta be something else. See, that firewall shield does something that in most any other circumstance, not a big deal. But for our case, becomes a problem. It covers up or even maybe bolts to with the studs that come through the firewall that hold the heater box into the car. And if you know Mark IVs, you absolutely know that the majority of that blend door foam has already blown out of this heater box. Now on this car, you can actually make some level of repair with it all in the car, and I'll show you guys how to do that. I really need it off the lift though, so I can open the doors and work inside the car. Oh, and I can't really get it off the lift until we get the rear subframe and the front subframe put back in the car. You can do it without having the doors wide open, but it's a million times easier to be able to open both doors all the way and give yourself quite a bit more room to work. Before I can put the engine in, I have to put the heat shieldy thing on. Before I put the heat shieldy thing on, I have to get the heater box out and properly recover all the blend doors. Before I can get the dash and the heater box and everything out, I gotta get the car back on the ground. Before I get the car back on the ground, I gotta get the diff put back in, or at least the subframe and all of that stuff put back in, so I can push the car off the lift. This is what happens when you go down the rabbit hole of while I'm in there. And that doesn't even touch on the most painful part is the one that hits you right in the wallet. Because you know, all this stuff ends up just costing you more money. I mentioned we pulled the rear subframe and all the rear end parts. Well, while I'm in there, I didn't want to just put all that stuff looking really shabby and nasty and rusty back in the car. So we'll send it to powder coat and get it powder coated. What I hadn't planned on doing was sending the trailing arms, but while I'm in there, I sent the trailing arms, which means I had to take all the bushings out, which means the wheel bearings have to come out. So while we're in there, we're gonna do all the bushings in the back end, which we probably would have done anyway, but also rear wheel bearings. These aren't the nice bolt-in ones like the Mark V and newer stuff. These are the press fit ones that to take out, you pretty much destroy the bearing. But wait, there's more while I'm in there. While I'm in there, I figured, you know what? Let's go ahead and replace the straps on the gas tank because they look terrible and they're actually pretty affordable. Not really a big deal and very little overlap. However, as I'm thinking about it, you know, while I'm in here, it might make sense to go ahead and pull the fuel pump out and we can clean the inside of the tank. Also not a big deal. However, I would also like to just get the tank down, out, clean everything. And we had a little, we'll call it oxidation incident when pulling the subframe out, so the tank needed to come out anyway. But while I'm in there, I'll go ahead and put that new fuel pump in, so at least there's that. Speaking on that rear end and all that stuff we already took out, while I'm in there, and this one I actually didn't even plan for, it completely came out of left field. While I'm in there, I have the diff sitting on the bench. We might as well go ahead and clean out the Haldex and get that straightened out. Not a big deal. Hopefully costs no money. A little bit of rehab on the case and whatnot, definitely worth the time and effort. But while I'm in there, since we're building a 500 horsepower car and we have a limited slip differential in the front transmission, why not put a limited slip differential in the rear as well? And of course, while we're in there, we'll have to clean the case up, potentially send it to either powder coat or just get media blasted or vapor blasted, whatever. I'm not quite sure just yet. We'll see how bad it is once we get all that stuff apart. But I don't want to take all that stuff apart until I have a limited slip differential unit ready to go back in, so those things aren't sitting apart for a month waiting on parts. Waiting on parts is another one of those things that just completely tumbles the project upside down. I mentioned replacing rear wheel bearings, not a terribly hard wait time, but that's just another thing that we have to wait for. The big thing I'm waiting for now before the stuff can go back up in the rear end of the car, because the diff doesn't need to be installed with everything. We can piece that together and put the diff in after the rear subframe is in. But we're waiting on hardware. I had to order like $200 worth of nuts and bolts in order just to put all that stuff back in the car. Not only do, again, I not want to put these rusty, shabby looking hardware back in, if that was the only issue, we could just clean that stuff up and recoat them or whatever. But the majority of that stuff is one-time use torque to yield, so it doesn't make sense to attempt to reuse this old shabby hardware when it's stretched out anyway and really should be replaced. And because we're working on a 16, 17-year-old car at this point, a lot of that stuff isn't in stock. Basically nothing for the car is in stock. And a lot of it is not one day or next day available. It's a couple of days out. By the way, if you're ever looking for hardware for really oddball stuff like control arms and things like that, that real specialty hardware, I know a lot of people hate buying stuff from the dealership, but look, often that is the best place to get it. You might pay a touch more, but you're gonna get it most of the time in a day or two rather than thumbing through the catalog, even if it's a really great catalog on a website, thumbing through that catalog and hoping you get the right one. The dealership can actually pull up a picture and show exactly where the bolts go. So the while you're in there train has definitely bit me pretty hard. However, we're starting to turn that corner and very soon we'll have the bottom end put back together. I'm waiting on these 4 screws that go in the transfer shaft right here, that cover plate. So this will go back together. The head will go on. I will be doing 2 timing videos for you guys, one on timing an engine stock and one on timing an engine modified with a head gasket spacer. Luckily though, once we crest that point and I have hardware, we can finally start getting things put back together. And then the awesome part is everything starts to go really quick. The major hiccup right now is planning for pulling the dash and redoing the blend doors before I put that shield in, before I put the engine in, before I get all that stuff done. So I gotta know, am I the only one that just feels like the while you're in there phrase punches you in the gut repeatedly over and over and over? And I'm sure there's like 55 other things that I forgot or never even thought of on the while you're in there train. So, you know, the bad part is that makes a project take longer. That also makes a project cost more money. However, there's just certain things that I don't feel comfortable doing, like putting things back together in a way that's maybe not really ideal, especially when we're so far into a project like this. And if you're wondering where we're at financially in this build, I don't know yet. And part of me doesn't ever want to know. Maybe tallying up how much you've spent on a project car is going to be a bad idea, but we'll do it at the end. Right after we fire the car up and take it on a spin and shake it down and make sure nothing is wrong, I'll total it all up and give you an idea of what it would cost. So now I'm gonna pull the gas tank out of this car, which can't be done until the rear subframe is out of the car. And really the gas tank is not a problem and I'm not worried about it. It's all the evap stuff that's bolted to. Some of this stuff looks like it's gonna be very unhappy coming out. Let me know in the comments, am I the only one that gets this gut punch of while I'm in there, or is this like a normal project car thing? I gotta believe it's a normal project car thing. However, maybe it's just me. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you again next time.